the preview video for Unit 4, which is Global Interactions, or the Early Modern Time Period. It spans the years 1450 to 1750, so we're getting into the time periods that are shorter but full of important content, just a lot more detailed than some of the previous units. Do you want to take a minute and explain my Gilmore Girls choice? Well, I do happen to be a huge fan. It is actually fitting for this unit. This time of year does get really hard to power through right before the holiday break, so just remember to drink a lot of coffee, also keep as calm as possible. Now we'll look at some of the logistical details of this unit. It does start November 13th. It's 14 lessons long, so it starts before the holiday break, but it continues past it into January. There are a few flex days this period, which allows time for CA review or more essay practice, whichever you feel like your scholars need the most. I'm going to go into the rest of the unit plan now, just some highlights though. So if you haven't had a chance to look at it in detail on your own time, I would pause this video now and go ahead and do that so that you get the big picture, not just the details. So the global context for this unit up here is orientation in time and space, because scholars will start to see how discoveries and exploration led to a truly global world and all the conflicts that go along with that. Really push scholars this unit to think about how these conflicts, their historical importance, and how the people of this time period felt about them depends so much on where and when they happened. The key concept is time, place, and space, which clearly aligns with the global context. Again, asking scholars to consider all of these events from the perspective of the people who lived through them. All these come together in the statement of inquiry. How one perceives a conflict depends on time and space. The statement of inquiry ties to really every lesson in this unit, definitely starting with the first, which is the Renaissance and Protestant Reformation. Someone challenging their church at this point in history would not at all be considered notable or worthy of a historical conflict. However, in the early modern time period, this is revolutionary. So many of the lessons in this unit kind of follow that same line of thought. Things that now, in 2017, would be considered normal were then something novel or countercultural. This statement of inquiry also lends itself to bringing up really good discussions about how people of the future will think about our modern struggles, international disagreements, etc. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the inquiry questions. You can read over the factual questions on your own time, but I did want to highlight a few of the conceptual and debatable questions. The conceptual question, this number 3, why did the Japanese resort to isolationism in the face of European expansion? Connects well to the statement of inquiry and highlights the concept that different cultures responded in varying ways to the new global market. Number 2 over here on the debatable questions is a really fun one. Scholars tend to have a lot to say about that. We can discuss the evils of the conquistadors, but also the long-term effects of this exploration. Then finally, number 3 is also really neat and can easily be tied to current events and current world events. You could even have scholars discuss this historically and then do research about a current event and how American isolationism would change the situation if you have some time for that. Okay, again, for the knowledge and skills, I'll let you read through the TEKS and knowledge and skills on your own, but I did want to highlight some of the reading and humanities skills specific to this unit. So periodization up here, for an AP teacher, this is no longer a specifically tested skill on the AP, but I think it still is really important for a holistic understanding of world history. Scholars know enough by now to start to probe them as to why the time periods break when they do and what changed so drastically during these periods. And of course, right here, scholars should continue DBQ practice often, whether that be just document analysis in a normal class period or a full DBQ, which I think there is one in this unit. And just try to take away support as often as you can as the year progresses so that by the end of the year, they're able to do a full one, start to finish, completely on their own. Okay, the interdisciplinary connections for this unit. I feel like I always say this, but this unit fits really well with so many other content areas, so I do just want to highlight a few in particular. If scholars have not read Julius Caesar yet in English, this is a fitting unit to discuss the effect of humanism that it had on literature and the effect it had on the interpretations of the past. So Shakespeare wrote Caesar obviously later in history, post-Renaissance, so kind of how he looked at that event because of that. Then the sciences, so speaking with your science teacher and asking him or her about scholars' prior knowledge about the important people in the scientific revolution can save you some time and allow scholars to see how impactful this event was on the study of science and the world around us. Because I know most science textbooks that I've looked at kind of start with some key players from that time period. Then lastly, art is super important in this unit, so touch base with your art teacher to see what pieces scholars should already be familiar with and how many of the Renaissance techniques they have studied in any detail. You can also connect the statement of inquiry to both science and art, asking scholars why these people were famous and revolutionary, and that typically happens in most part due to the time and place in which they lived, which of course connects to that. Okay, I'm going to move into stage 2 of the unit plan, so this is the assessment portion. The project for this unit is a map showing all of the interactions of this time period with the results of these interactions presented in a creative way. This project definitely appeals to the creative scholar, but I have seen some really unexpected interpretations that were awesome. Scholars are then asked to do an OPCVL analysis of documents that taught them about these interactions, which ties into DBQ practice and just a good skill as the year progresses. So the 2 criterions it assesses are A and D. Definitely take some time to look through the rubrics and task descriptors on your own. I did just want to highlight the 7 to 8 range here, but if you have any questions after you look through the entire rubric, definitely reach out to me. I like to show my scholars the 7 to 8 range also when I explain the project, so they know the ideal and what they're shooting for. So criterion A assesses knowing and understanding, and this is assessing how well the scholar describes the effects of trade and what terminology he or she uses to explain those consequences. Criterion D is thinking critically, and this is assessing how well the scholar analyzed the sources and does so to create a valid argument about the issues and concepts surrounding the global interactions of this time period. Okay, that was stage 2 super quickly. So again, if you look through it and have any questions, just definitely shoot me an email or call. I'm going to move to stage 3, and this is the backwards planning stage of the unit. This focuses on the logistics for teaching, day-to-day, that kind of stuff. So the approaches to learning is the first portion of stage 3, and this unit focuses on collaboration skills, at practicing empathy, giving good feedback, and reflection skills. Collaboration skills are important as the end of the year approaches. With scholars writing more essays, peer grading can save you a lot of time. However, for this to be an effective exercise, scholars must be able to give good feedback with empathy and in a collaborative way. This is great practice for the academic world, but you can also make sure they know that this is part of any career field that they'll go into later in life. And then I think reflection skills tie closely with that. They push scholars to practice identifying their own strengths and weaknesses. Like I said, this definitely goes well with collaboration skills, as they need to not only know how to give good feedback, but also receive it well. It's also vital as the year progresses, as they start to enter review for the final CA or the AP, that they know how to identify what they should work on most. Again, you can tell them how important this is later in life, as I think every job asks you to reflect upon your greatest weaknesses and strengths, and every boss they'll have will want to see growth in some way. So here are the learning experiences for this unit. If you would like any details or handouts of any of these once you read them over, just shoot me an email. A lot of them are in the resource bank or an archived curriculum for sure. Scholars do write 3 full essays this unit, so be sure to create or ask me for the outlines, rubrics, etc. if you need those. They will need to utilize those to have success on these 3 for sure. This unit is really content heavy, so choose instructional strategies really carefully to make sure you hit all the content while avoiding straight lecture, which I think is easy to do in history period, but definitely as we get into these more detailed units. Okay, as far as differentiation, this and the formatives are pretty self-explanatory, but I did want to mention that differentiating essays is really time-consuming for you, but really necessary for some scholars, especially those who may be ELL. I've done a lot of this in the past year, so if you're at all interested in seeing how I do it, you know where to find me. I also provide a 1-pager map, this one down here, of the major trade routes and just a general timeline that scholars can reference in their binder. Like I said in the introduction, our time periods are getting shorter, but that does mean scholars need to understand more details and see those connections, which any scholars who struggle may need some extra help with that. Okay, as far as the real world connections, I try to remind myself often that while world history is super important, how scholars absorb this material and apply the lessons learned to real world problems is the most important aspect of our course. So our scholars will be in the real world before we know it. So take time this unit to kind of highlight how a lot of the social issues that began in this time period are still very much relevant. And you can look through these for more detail. Okay, now we're just in that last stage with the day-by-day learning objectives, key points, and assessment. I won't read them all to you as that would be pretty boring. So take time to read through those on yourself, on your own time. But I did want to, again, just mention that I put over here in yellow, when there's an AML, that's the annotated model lesson with all the attachments, is uploaded to Blackboard. The Renaissance AML is a great one to look at if you struggle with getting a large amount of content into a one-day's lesson, while still incorporating skill practice and not just lecturing the whole time. And then those guided readings that I create are also noted in yellow, highlighted under each lesson. There's one per week for each week of the unit, and I was really excited about a lot of these that I found and created the questions for. So definitely look through them, see if you can use them in your classroom. I've noticed that my students really enjoy doing them more than I thought they would, so that's been kind of fun this year. Okay, that's this unit in a super quick snapshot, but please do not suffer in silence. Use all the resources uploaded to Blackboard to your advantage, and you are all my heroes for teaching the entire early modern time period in 14 lessons. I know it's tough, but we definitely can do it. So send an email, call, text me with any questions that come up throughout this unit, and I'll be sure to get back to you as quickly as possible. Have a great time teaching it, and I will see everyone at Collaboration Day in January. Thanks so much.